For decades now, Square Enix has been the first company you think of when someone says the word JRPG. You have Final Fantasy, the Mana series, Octopath Traveler, Dragon Quest, and the list goes on for miles. They even made one of the first Mario JRPGs when they used to be called Squaresoft. And when you're that well known for one very specific game genre, you know you have a heavy amount of power in your hands. Out of every RPG series Square Enix has the rights to, the Valkyrie series is one that I've never heard of until recently. It started back with the first game, Valkyrie Profile, on the PS1, and as you can clearly see, it looks almost like any other JRPG you'd see at the time. Turn-based combat, magic spells, and a party to take into battle. Most of these games focus on Norse mythology, with characters like Odin guiding the Valkyrie through the story. And just from researching, most of them seem to be about the same, with the Nintendo DS title looking more interesting since it doesn't follow an actual Valkyrie. So if anything, I might have to go back and check that one out for myself. But the last Valkyrie title that was released before Elysium was a mobile game called Valkyrie Anatomia back in 2019. Then it was shut down only a year later, with the fans saying it was a total waste of time. But hey, that's just live service games. Well, today we have to look at the newest game in the series because it changed everything about how it originally played. That's right, just like so many other JRPG series, this one moved into the realm of being an action RPG. And we'll have to see for sure if that was the right move or not, but just judging by the review scores it has compared to the rest of the games, maybe they did something wrong. Either way, the story here follows the main character Marie, a Valkyrie sent back to Midgard to fight against the aftermath of Ragnarok. She's led by Odin, who gives her various weapons and abilities. Unlike most other RPGs, there aren't many NPCs to talk to in each level. Instead, we have these flowers that give bits and pieces of info about people who used to live here. There isn't too much more built into the world itself, and at times it can just feel a bit too empty and lifeless. But the biggest plot point here focuses on our journey to rescue and recruit each of the Einherjar. These are powerful spirits with the ability to fight back against the enemies we face. If you've played other games in the series, you know that they're more like summons than actual team members. So throughout each chapter, we do fight alongside them while getting a bit of backstory for who they are and what motivates them to keep fighting on. It's also interesting that they all come from different time periods, so they can all have completely different experiences to share. I just wish this felt more like a group than a Valkyrie with a bunch of summons. While the sub-stories and quests do give some exposure for the Einherjar's backgrounds, they didn't feel like real characters. They all travel alongside Maria, but they don't seem to have any chemistry amongst themselves. Even towards the end, they seem to be much more attached to Maria than each other. And for these characters that have unique backgrounds and come from different times, you would think they'd have some better development together. And it's sad because some chapters make them feel more like pets than having a strong party of warriors. But overall, it ties back to the story being more bare bones and not having enough depth built in. I've seen longtime fans say that this may be a decent game in some places, but they still don't see it as a good game in the Valkyrie Profile series, with the shallow plot being one of the main things they dislike. I was shocked to see that other games have way more NPCs and Einherjar, but this one only has 4 from beginning to end. It would have been nice to build up a more detailed story surrounding those 4, but we mostly focus on Marie all the way up until the end. There's 4 different endings you can get based on certain choices that you make leading up to the final battle, like collecting all the verdant blossoms and even choosing to talk to a very specific character. And I won't spoil those endings, but it's nice to know that the end does branch off. The choices that you make for these endings all give some key details about everything taking place and expand on characters that don't come up as often. You have totally different boss fights you can do as well, so it might be worth going back to do if you enjoyed the rest of the plot. The combat here revolves around using different elements like fire, electric, or ice to build up the stagger gauge on enemies. When that gauge fills up, your enemy is wide open for combos. It's pretty standard stuff, but there's some options of how to deal that damage. You're given a variety of weapons that you unlock as you go through the story, and they all have different combos and movesets. So you start off with a sword, then get more weapons like a rapier and a lance. I wasn't a big fan of the lance since it was slow, but in some places all these weapons do end up being useful. Plus they get more powerful the more you use them, so it does come in handy to swap every now and then. So even if you do have favorites, they encourage you to experiment and find more combos with each weapon. While it doesn't affect the stagger gauge, it's good to pay attention to those weaknesses to end fights just a tad bit faster. But to get that stagger gauge filled up, you'll be using the multiple magic attacks that you find along the way. That includes throwing fireballs, shooting strings of lightning, or even ramming into dudes with the power of earth. Each of these elements have variations you can experiment with, but you will need to have the right one for whatever battle you find yourself in. With only 4 spots to place these and over 5 types of magic you can use, it does get tough being fully prepared for every single fight. But when you do start to unlock more Einherjar, that's when everything starts to fall into place. Each of them have elements and moves of their own, and it's pretty fun sending them out just to have them fight alongside you. Mixing together your own magic with the summons felt really satisfying in horde fights and especially in boss battles. Just the fact that enemies will swap their focus off of you and onto the summons gives you more options to heal yourself or set up attacks from a different angle. Despite a lot of these things being standard compared to other action RPGs, I still had a decent time with the combat. But the question still stands about why they would take another turn-based series and make it into an action game. Takahiro Kondo, the director and producer of Valkyrie Elysium, stated that after his team replayed the rest of the games in the series, they came to the conclusion that the genre should change. That's why this ended up being an action RPG rather than a traditional JRPG. And if you've played most of the recent Final Fantasy games, then you can see it was a motivation for that series to change too. But where I can see a game like Final Fantasy 16 taking that formula to the next level, I'm wondering why so many more of these RPGs are just doing the same thing. Sure, the argument that most people are playing more action games is very true. Almost every game I talk about on this channel is an action game in one way or another. But seeing that this series hasn't had a mainline title in over 14 years, it seems weird to think that the older fans would want something like this. For Final Fantasy, we get those games every other year, so it's not like you have to go too far back to the last standard RPG in that series. But waiting 14 years and being greeted with something totally different is kinda weird to me. For what it is, I did enjoy my time with it despite not having the best story and graphics. If it's something that you're interested in, then I think it's definitely worth picking up on sale. But what do you think about Valkyrie Elysium? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe for more videos just like this one, and I'll see you all in the next video.